Currently on the screen is a look at what is now Tropical Storm Harvey. Welcome to another update on the developing tropical scene via the Cayman Hurricane Center, and here's Adam with the details.
Yes, thanks, David, and yes, welcome everybody. We are indeed talking about Tropical Storm Harvey. The latest advisory on Harvey at the location at 13 North, 57.4 West, or about 140 nautical miles east of Barbados. Currently has winds of 40 miles per hour. It's moving west at 18 with a minimum central pressure of 1,005 millibars. Uh, we do have tropical storm watches and warnings issued for areas of the Windward Islands. In particular, we have tropical storm warnings for Martinique, St. Lucia, Barbados, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with a tropical storm watch for Dominica. As expected, tropical storm conditions are expected within the warning area very, very soon as we go through the overnight hours and into early Friday morning. We will be expecting those tropical storm conditions to affect those areas. And with the tropical storm watch, we're expecting those tropical storm conditions possible within the watch area there as well. So here is the present satellite imagery of Tropical Storm Harvey. It is sort of organized and sort of disorganized in a way of it is building itself some deep convection, and for the first time it's developing some really cold cloud tops, as you see along here. Sorry, let's change that over so you can clearly see that. So again, there are the cold cloud tops, heavy thunderstorms that's even starting to head in towards the island of Barbados, which is located on the southwest side of this heavy cell right along here. And conditions there in Barbados is expected to continue to deteriorate throughout the night and onwards through the morning as the storm moves either very close to Barbados, if not directly over Barbados. Just taking a quick note, you could also see in the far top right corner, we have ourselves Invest Area 92L. This area has quite a high potential at this moment in time at possibly becoming the next system for the season, possibly tropical depression, maybe, just maybe, merely making it to tropical storm intensity as it heads towards the northern Leeward Islands or just north of there and continue a west-northwesterly direction. But just mentioning that as it is in the satellite frame, interestingly enough, don't really see that too often where you have two systems within the same floater imagery. But anyway, I digress. We go on to the overall surface charts here, just giving you the overall picture. And again, we have our tropical storm here in heading towards the Windward Islands, Invest Area 92. Another area of interest that the National Hurricane Center is watching. GERT has now transitioned to extratropical, no longer any sort of tropical issue. It's now on its way towards the United Kingdom as a extra tropical windstorm, likely to give some issues there in the next 5 days or so. Also to mention a tropical wave which is really being enhanced quite a bit as it moves through the Central Caribbean, and it's being enhanced by an upper level low, part of the upper level tropospheric trough that extends out through the Atlantic as such. And I'll mention more about that because that will have some sort of may have some sort of impacts to how Tropical Storm Harvey makes its way through the Caribbean. So going into the radar imagery here for Harvey, you could see, let me just bring that down a little. You can see the heavier storm starting to make its way towards the island of Barbados. You can't really see Barbados too well on this imagery, but the island of Barbados is located here. And again, the heavier storms now making its way across Barbados, and even parts of it starting to impact the chain of islands there. That would be, the Grenadines, St. Vincent, and also St. Lucia to start feeling those effects there from this first bit here. The center of circulation of the system is still a little bit off to the east again, around here. We'll see that continuing on towards the west, and again, we'll be seeing those tropical storm conditions probably depending on the land, if it landfalls on Barbados or goes north or south will determine how much of tropical storm force winds will be felt, as the tropical storm force winds is mainly on the north and northeast side of this system. Okay, so here is the upper level winds for the system, and pointing out here, again, we have this very large upper level low that's located here in central Cuba, another upper level low out here in the Atlantic, all part of this trough, that large upper level tropospheric trough. And it's interesting, a couple days ago when Harvey, former 91L in its infancy, was out here in the central Atlantic, this up-level low was centered more north of Puerto Rico, and you see this large area of wind shear. This large area of wind shear was more all over the Caribbean here. Very high wind shear, wall of wind shear extending out through most of the Caribbean. Now, as we could see here, Harvey located here, and Harvey with a very good upper level anticyclone here protecting the system, but this also extends out quite a bit into the Caribbean and up to parts of the southwest Atlantic. The upper level trough has since, or the low along the trough has shifted off towards the west, and as you can see here in green, their area is now covered with fairly light wind shear. So no longer is there the issue of the upper winds. There might still be somewhat of an issue as the upper level anticyclone isn't exactly located right on top of the center. Again, the center of the circulation is located here, and the center of anticyclonic circulation is located on the north and west side, thus producing some bit of northerly shear. And this graphic doesn't really show it too well. It's kind of a bit of a sharper sort of cut through, so there's a bit of easterly shear that is affecting the system, and again, as you can see on the satellite floater for the system, the center of circulation isn't where the heaviest of the convection is. The center of circulation is actually located just to the east, located right about in this area here. And the convective mass is being blown on the east side towards the west. And again, there's, as you can see with the flow starting to take place, more of that northerly shear is starting to impact. However, it's not really expected to have too much of an impact. Again, only in about 5, 10, maybe 15 knots. Certainly not enough to impede any sort of serious development. The only thing that may sort of impede the development would be the slightly drier air here to the north and east. However, again, Harvey does have a decent moisture field here, and that may be able to protect. The other issue is that, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the area here in the Eastern Caribbean is kind of considered the Eastern Caribbean graveyard, and it is as such that usually weak systems or systems that have not yet developed, they tend to weaken or die out in this area because with the atmospheric forcings, you do tend to get higher sort of trade flow coming in through this area, and they tend to rip up these systems. However, again, this is developed. It's a tropical storm, so it may survive that. And looking at the forecast intensity guidance as well as the forecast by the National Hurricane Center, it is expected to survive that. So overall, you know, things aren't really too bad for the system. We'll continue to monitor, and I'm quite worried about what could potentially happen, especially once it gets into the Central Caribbean. And the reason that I'm concerned is because conditions are, in terms of the upper levels and the mid levels, are expected to get better. Also, generally in the Central Caribbean, that's where trades tend to start falling off, so the system starts to slow down. So with that being said, we go on to the next thing, which is the oceanic heat content. And I've mentioned about the sea surface temperatures before in other videos and this as well, but just reiterating on this, you know, high ocean heat content here. Again, all of this here, even enough to support yourself a decent tropical storm. So it's doing quite fantastic. And again, once we get into areas such as here, definitely enough to support yourself a strong tropical storm or hurricane even. And then as it gets to the central and western Caribbean, you got this very high ocean heat content, and certainly enough to support yourself a very decent, strong hurricane, even major hurricane. And it's concerning because, again, the forecast track, the official forecast track is this here, and there is quite a likely possibility that we could see this pull a little further north, and I'll explain why here in a sec. But here's the official forecast track, and it is expected to strengthen as it moves towards the west. Again, there may be some issues for Jamaica, the Cayman area, the Yucatan, all the way down to Nicaragua, maybe even as far south as parts of the ABC Islands could get affected. And again, it just depends on how much the system develops. Basically, if you think about it this way, that a stronger system, a stronger developing system would tend to pull further north, while a weaker system or weakening system would tend to pull further to the south. So what we're looking at here is that if the system continues and is able to intensify further, it'll probably track more on the northern side of the cone, if not slightly above the cone. And again, if it does so, it'll be getting to that very high ocean heat content, and that might be a big issue, as this thing could potentially see some sorts of rapid intensification, possibly. There has been some chatter about that possibility once this thing gets into the Western Caribbean, and it's certainly possible, just depending on what the system does between now and, say, Saturday evening. During this time, it's crunch time for the system. We will know exactly what the system, or we'd have a better idea what the system will do once we see how it handles within this area. So, adding to this, I want to bring up this, which is the model guidance, track guidance for our tropical storm. This is the 00 Zulu model runs, and again, models have been shifting, north and south for a good couple days now. But the interesting thing is that there are some more models starting to spread out towards the north. Whilst there are one or two that is shifting slightly further to the south, and the general consensus agreed upon by the models that the National Hurricane Center look at the most, which the general consensus, again followed by the official forecast cone, goes more like so. The overall model consensus is as marked out here in the white line, a little bit further to the north, and as you can see, there are models that are taking further north. I don't honestly think that we're looking at the system heading to, say, Haiti, or looking at a direct hit onto Jamaica. But again, if the system does strengthen, it will pull further to the north. I do think that this could be the case. Again, conditions are expected to get more favorable for the system as it moves into the Caribbean. Again, high ocean heat content, you can't really rule it out. So again, I do think that we're looking at a maybe slightly further north track than what the forecast says at the moment. We'll keep an eye on it. But again, this is something that needs to be monitored, because the National Hurricane Center did initially forecast this to become a hurricane in the Western Caribbean. Kind of backed off now, stating that if it does move further south, it would interact more with land, thus decreasing the chances for higher intensification. However, the further north it goes, the more intensification it would have. So again, this for the short term, definitely an impact affecting the Eastern Caribbean here. In the medium term, we're looking at potentially impacts to Jamaica, impacts to parts of the Cayman area, and again, impacts towards northern Honduras. And then we could look a little bit further into the Yucatan there later. I do want to note that the National Hurricane Center did say that models are trending further northwards later in the guidance, and they're doing this because they are thinking that if it pulls further north, more favorable conditions, things could get particularly interesting when it does so. So it's a wait and see. Again, there are some model guidance that do bring the system into the Eastern Caribbean and dissipate it somewhere within the Central Caribbean here, or weaken it down to a tropical wave and continues it on in towards Nicaragua. However, these models have been noted in recent times not to be doing very well. Matter of fact, one model in particular, the GFS Global Forecast System. We know that it had been upgraded recently. However, I've seen a document recently that stated that things weren't performing as well as it should, and more or less the GFS had, ever since the update, has more or less failed to develop or show these past tropical systems that had come about. I think from Emily onwards, it failed to predict any of these systems, and even up to recently, it's still failing to forecast this. As a matter of fact, when the system was still an invest further out, it still very much showed a different story at this location at this time than what we have now. So again, not really trusting it as much. So that's why the National Hurricane Center is trusting these more than the actual global models such as GFS and the European. So, well, again, we'll have to see how things go. But again, in the immediate term, the islands in the Eastern Caribbean are the ones being impacted. And we're talking about the islands of Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Martinique, Dominica. Could even see as much as Guadeloupe getting the outer bands of the system. So it's definitely something that we'll need to pay close attention to. I just want to point out something that even I just noticed here on the most recent satellite imagery. Some real cold cloud tops, some very strong convection blowing up on this convective mass on our tropical storm, and you got to be very careful with this, because this could definitely produce higher winds, stronger rain, and potential for even some water spouts and tornadoes. So again, the island of Barbados, you guys should have been hunkered down and prepped already for this system, as it is starting to impact and will continue to do so through the night. The rest of you guys there in the island chains, if you've done your preparation, good. If you've almost completed, look, now it's your time to get hunkered down and just hope for the best. Again, we're not talking about the system being a hurricane at this point, so at least that's your saving grace. But nevertheless, a tropical storm such as this can still do quite a bit of damage, especially when it comes to rainfall. I'll probably be back a little later on. We'll see how things progress, and we'll keep you informed on the situation at hand. And as we go through the next day or so, we'll update you on how the forecast for this system is and how the overall condition is on the system as it moves through the Eastern Caribbean. Anyway, that is it for now. I'm Adam McDoom for Cameron Hurricane Center, and I'll see you later.